and welcome to Found in Translation, a weekly-ish exploration of one fellow's translation of the Christian scriptures, one chapter or two at a time. I'm Brandon Rhodes, and across the internet from me is the translator himself, Brandon Johnson. Hi, Brandon.
Hi, Brandon.
Good to see you. Our guest co-host today is Kalie Hargrove. Kalie May, she, her pronouns, is a writer, theologian, and ordained minister. She lives in the greater Atlanta area with her partner and 2 kids. Kalie has been part of LGBTQ plus activism, bringing awareness of the legalized discrimination queer and trans students face at religious universities. Kalie May is also the director of digital outreach for the Center of Prophetic Imagination and the co-host of the Lies That Bind Us podcast. She received her Master of Divinity from United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities. Kalie May, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Hey, could you please tell folks a little bit more about the work you're doing at the Center for Prophetic Imagination, as well as your podcast?
Yeah, so the Center for Prophetic Imagination really focus on trying to bridge the socio-spiritual gap where we are very much finding ourselves in a time where religion and spirituality is simultaneously being a thing that people are holding on to for hope, but also the very thing that is like causing the most harm, and kind of working through that. I do a lot more Christian focused type things. My degree is more in biblical studies and things like that. Our executive director is more focused on like spirituality and kind of has a mysticism type background. And so we are putting out resources that help people with like their own spiritual journey, which I hate that term, spiritual journey, but is what came to my head at the time. Kind of help create a counter narrative to some of the things going on in the world, because like a lot of times we have people that get on and be like, why do you care about like giving this insight about Christianity? And it's like, well, part of it is because Christianity is so harmful that one of the ways that you need to go about like dismantling Christofascism is giving an alternative to stuff that people believe. And so I think it's important work. It's not necessarily for everybody, but also, yeah, I think that it kind of needs to be done. The Lies That Bind Us is a podcast that between me and Ash, and we have guests on everyone. Well, so we're 3 or 4 episodes in. We've had 1 guest. So guests will be there, but it's predominantly just me and her talking about more kind of social type myths that we kind of believe in. So far we've covered the myth of the free market, which just came out last week. I don't know how long until this is published, but which looked at like the idea, the fact is free market and capitalism can't necessarily go together without huge corruption issues. And we've also talked about like the myth of the male protector, that like the idea that men are natural leaders, and where we don't just like get on and say, yeah, this is completely a lie. No, we try to look at it and think and look at like some of the truths within a myth, but also like how it's being exploited or used. So it's not just everything you've been taught is wrong. It's like a more nuanced discussion.
So, great. That sounds like it's going to be a promising show.
Yeah, we're having a lot of fun doing it. Like I said, we're 4 episodes into it. It's bi-weekly, which I think means every other week.
I never know.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. So it's every other week.
Far out. Well, it's great that you're going to be just with that work that you do, as well as the background in biblical studies. I'm extra excited to have you on this show. We're going to be talking this week about Matthew chapters 19 and 20. This season, we're doing it with a particular focus, not just on the work of translation, but on reading it from a context of authoritarianism in the United States, and reading it as a text against authoritarianism and written under authoritarianism, written under imperial occupation. That's the frame that we're bringing to reading this. If you haven't had a chance to read Brandon's translation, for those of you watching, we're going to have it up on the screen here in just a minute. And if you're listening, there is a link to read it in the episode notes. So hit pause on that, on us, and give it a read. We'll be right back.
If
Hey everybody,
we get done
welcome
and we're
back.
like, we're running out of time. We're only
while
done
we
with
were setting
19.
all
Then
this up,
let's do another
on the
part
back
two of
end,
this
we
or
were
something.
talking about how much is in these two chapters, especially just within that theme of authoritarianism and empire. How Kalie, can you share again what you were saying to the Brandons here about kind of what the overarching theme as you see it
My
is?
back.
Yeah. Well, for Matthew itself, I see Matthew as very intentionally being anti-empire throughout basically everything. And it's kind of also written a way of like, no, I'm not being anti-Rome. I'm being, talking to Jewish people about Jewish things. But it's very like clearly when you start studying it, very anti-Roman. These two chapters, the author is really taking on hierarchical understandings within the Roman Empire, things that were like fundamental to the Pax Romana, which is things like patriarchal hierarchy, children being subservient to adults, the rich being above the poor, healthy above somebody who's blind, right? And then it ends with in these two chapters with the sons of Zebedee, their mom asking for one of those sons to be on the right and one to be on the left, and this is kind of a foreshadowing from the author being like, no, the people who are going to be on the right and left sides of Jesus when he comes into glory is the people that were on the cross with him at the crucifixion, because ultimately the author Matthew sees the crucifixion as a fulfillment of the prophecy in Daniel. And so it's ending with a foreshadowing of those who are going to be like on the right and left hand side of Jesus are actually those who oppose the empire. So he very much just like tackling these hierarchical things, which are seen as what holds Rome together. Like that image of it's like the weird umbrella, that umbrellas don't work this way, but it has like Jesus at the top, husband, wife, children.
Right.
Like that is based off of Roman understandings of family structures and hierarchies. It's the idea that it's Christian is interesting, because it predates Christianity because it's Roman. Obviously Jesus is
The paterfamilias and all that,
yeah, but it's like Jesus here is very much turning those upside down. Like that umbrella thing, right, at least in the family structure, doesn't work within Matthew 19 and 20.
Totally. Well, let's get started on this. Brandon, would you please read the first narrative chunk there? I'm sure there's a classier way of saying that. But narrative chunk is what we're going with today.
I believe the official term is pericope. But when Jesus finished these sayings, he left Galilee and went to the region of Judea, east of the Jordan River. Large crowds followed him, and he healed them there. Pharisees came to test him and asked, "Is it acceptable for a man to send his wife away for just any reason?" So he answered, "Haven't you read that the Creator made them male and female from the beginning?" And said, "That is why a man will leave his father and mother and unite with his wife, and the two will be one family. So they are no longer two, but rather one family. Therefore, may no one divide what God has joined together." "Why then," they challenged, "did Moses command to give a document of separation and send her away?" He told them, "Moses allowed for you sending your wives away as a counter to your unfeeling hearts. But it wasn't that way in the beginning. So I'm telling you, whoever sends his wife away except on the basis of engaging in sexual infidelity and marries another woman is maritally unfaithful. The students told him, if a man has such a reason with his wife, it would have been better not to marry her. He responded, not everyone can accept this idea, other than those for whom it has been presented. There are some eunuchs who were that way from their mother's belly, and others who were made eunuchs by people, and some made themselves eunuchs for the heavenly reign. Whoever can accept this, accept it. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. What an interesting stretch. And these two halves of these two sections are usually separated out as sections. The divorce question, and then sort of this non sequitur about eunuchs. But reading them together, Kalie Mae, there's a lot of peculiar lines in the story, particularly for those of us who are queer or queer allied. What's simmering for you here?
I mean, so there's this passage is used so often by people who don't want to be affirming, and there's so much I want to say. But first, I want to reflect on the translation. I think adding the word family into and the two will become one really reflects the idea, because we have so spiritualized this idea of marriage, whenever in the ancient context that literally just it meant to become one unit, like it was a physical thing, because marriage was a contract or covenant between two families with the exchange of goods, which was women. And marriage wasn't this spiritual thing that Christians try to make it now. So I do want to say that because that is a very good little shift that you did there. But yeah, like whenever it comes to affirming LGBTQ plus people, the first thing you learn about whenever you take an exegesis class is like you have to know the scope of a passage, and this passage is not about whether or not it's two people of the same sex can get married. That's outside of the scope. This is about divorce. This is about people divorcing their wife, men divorcing their wife specifically to just get rid of them, like without any reason. And the quotations that Jesus uses are really like pointed, because the if you scroll down, because I am looking at the text. Maybe I just had missed it. Anyways, he quotes Genesis 2, right? Made them male and female, or 1 and 2, made them male and female from the beginning. This isn't about gender binaries, right? This is pointing to the image of God. That Jesus is making a point that male and female are both part of the image of God. And in Genesis 1, there is a singular image that is put on humanity as a singular entity. And then so the individual parts of humanity are also made male and female. So humanity as a whole is the image of God. And so what Jesus is saying is like the image of God, it takes both men and women. In regard to like trans people, the image of God, if it requires both male and female, then God is neither male nor female. But that also means that one person who takes part in the whole of the image of God doesn't have to fall in one singular binary. Yesterday was Trans Day Visibility. So the illustration that I came up with is like, we think of the Earth in hemispheres, right? There's a north and south, and east and west hemisphere. Well, if you make a map that crosses two hemispheres, you don't say that's not part of the Earth. Like, no,
right?
Because it is a little fraction of the full image, but it's zoomed in. So like, just because things are broken up into binaries doesn't mean that everything within that has to be a binary. in the same way, trans people get to exist because humanity is the reflection of God. God's not binary in gender, so there's no like, yeah.
Like God is simultaneously agender and genderful, like beyond
Yeah.
gender, and like contains the infinite plurality of gender expression.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Quote Father
Jesus here
Rohr,
is,
transcends and includes, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And Jesus here is setting up an argument saying that men and women are equal, like saying it takes both men and women to, you know, be part of the image of God. And then goes
Scandalous.
into, yeah, and then goes into Genesis 3 when it says a man will leave his father and mother and unite with his wife. That's actually backwards for Jesus's time. Men didn't leave their families and join the woman's family. The woman leaves her family and joins the man's family because the women were seen as property. So Jesus is like pointing back to Genesis 2 to be like, the way that this is working, like even in scripture, is different than how you're doing it already. And so right off the bat, Jesus is being like, you are missing like the point here. Like the idea that you can divorce based off of any reason has a power dynamic to it. And if you have a say, but women don't, and this, this is going to get into our current understanding of no fault divorce, right? And don't like, this isn't saying that no fault divorce is wrong, but it's about power dynamics with Jesus. The reason no fault divorce should exist is because it helps remove power dynamics from marriages. Jesus is very against the power dynamics within this context of marriage. And personally, I don't think Jesus likes marriage at all, because he says in a different part that in the resurrection there would be no being married or given in marriage, which is interesting that he says it both ways, because in many languages, a man gets married and a woman is a man gets married and a woman is given in marriage because he is property. And so like Jesus is very against this cultural understanding that women become the property of men. He does it a couple different times. This is another one. And
even earlier in Matthew, is it Matthew 5? There's the way Brandon translates, don't look at a woman lustfully. Just if you're going to do that, pluck your eye out. He translates it as something along the lines of, any man who looks at a woman with an eye to possess her. Like, if you objectify and see another person through this lens of ownership, that's the thing that like it needs to be renounced. Like, pluck your eye out if you can only see that kind of objectification, commodification.
And that word that's used there is the exact same word that's used in the Septuagint for the 10 Commandments for you shall not covet. You should not covet your neighbor's wife, his house, his ox, right? Like all of these property things.
It's about desiring
Jesus then ups
possessions.
That. Like, but that word is also not sexual. Like it's not inherently sexual. It would be really weird for that word to be sexual, because Jesus like also uses that word to like wanting to have a feast with his disciples, if I'm remembering it right. And like that's weird to have a sexual desire for food. So like reading that into it is like, it's not very hermeneutically sound in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, and talking about problems with eyes, both in Sermon on the Mount and in other Jewish literature of the time, it was universally a greed issue, not a sexual desire issue.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, if we want to keep going through this passage, because it just keeps getting better.
It does.
Yeah. He escalates.
Yeah, I do like how I do like the translation here, because it makes it sound like the disciples, and I know that you use students here, which is actually I think, a better translation because we've hyper religiousized disciples. So
Right,
students
right.
is good.
Right.
To make it seem like they understand it, because like most translations will basically say it's better for a man to not marry,
Right.
like at all, if this is how it's going to be, which is
Mhm.
interesting because that's kind of that would mean that men shouldn't get married because then they would have to treat women as equals.
Right.
But also but the way that you have it here makes it sound like they understand it more, and they're saying,
Mhm.
if they have such a reason, and the word does mean reason or charge, kind of like
Okay.
a crime, which points back to the sexual infidelity.
Mhm.
So basically, it's saying, yeah, we get it, but if a man believes this, then he shouldn't have married her in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a different take than most translations. I like that one.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was finding as I translated Matthew. Is I think Matthew has the disciples getting it more than we're often taught.
Quite a bit, yeah.
Um, not entirely. Like they don't fully understand it until later, but we're often kind of given this picture of like the bumbling fools, the disciples that
Mhm.
don't understand it
Yeah,
at all.
yeah.
And I don't think that's the picture that Matthew has in mind. I think it is a little bit more like that in Mark, uh, but I don't think Matthew paints that picture that same way that we're
Yeah.
usually taught.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that also. Yeah, we could probably get into how Christianity has a tendency to do that to the Jewish characters within the stories. But yeah,
Mhm.
it's a different conversation.
I mean, that's
But
one
yeah.
of the layers. One of the layers that we bring as we're reading through this is like catching all the little snags
Mhm.
of bending towards anti-Semitism
Yeah,
and
yeah,
antagonism towards our Jewish kin, that is layered into not so much the Greek as it is the translation.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
The translation history really has some unchecked anti-Semitism in it. So translating
Absolutely.
faithful to our neighbors, has been part of what Brandon's been doing.
And it's also different in the sense that, like, if I write a lot about white supremacy, right? Um,
Uh-huh.
or talk about it quite a bit. In 2,000 years, somebody could take what I'm saying and say I'm racist because things have changed, and maybe somehow white people are now the oppressed group. I don't necessarily see that coming, but um, like that could happen. Like, but these are actually like written to Jewish people, by Jewish people, and
Right.
so any like criticism that might be there is from a perspective of like, this is us, we are kind of, um
Mhm.
but we have also taken that as the oppressor, as very anti-Semitic in our culture and in our understandings of history, to exaggerate that far more than was originally intended. And so yeah, it's very problematic. Like there are critiques of Jewish culture in this because it's Jewish people writing Jewish people. Um,
Right.
that we
Yeah.
might want to say, you know what, this isn't necessarily for us. This isn't necessarily supposed to be used to like
But isn't all of the
uh
Bible a love letter written by God directly for me?
So
yes,
I
yes
want
it
to.
is.
We can move past that.
Sure.
You just open. You can do Bible bibliomancy. Just opening up your Bible. Put your finger on a
Mhm.
page, and
Oh
God is
man, I
God
have been
speaking to
there.
you.
Yeah, the Ouija board Bible.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, this exchange of his antagonists being like, "Well, why did Moses say we can give the woman a document of separation and send her away?" And he's like, "Look, it's because you're hard-hearted, and like if you just separate and then
Yeah.
remarry, you're the one who's actually in the wrong here." Implicit within it is in that day, it's again understanding the economic reality as it intersects with gender. Like women are going to be consigned for the most part unless they have another effectively patron husband. Um, it's typically sex work or just uh,
Mm-hmm.
poverty. So it is
Well, she's
absolutely a form of unfaithfulness to the
yeah.
partner to just send them away.
You're essentially sending somebody who is supposed to be like, I don't know. It's so hard to talk about it in terms, because it like marriage in ancient times is something different than what it is today. It's
Right,
a
right.
completely different thing.
It's easy to trip up on some anachronism here. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like if I talk about a duel, right? And you hear me talking about a duel, and you think like with swords or like with
Hamilton.
pistols, Hamilton, right? But really,
Mhm.
I'm talking about Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Two
Right.
different things
Yeah.
with kind
Uh-huh.
of with a similar like idea of two people going against each other, right? But it's completely different, and that's what we have with marriage, because what
Yeah.
we have today within marriage is not even the same practice of exchange of a human person as a covenant between two families that existed in the first century. What we have today
Yeah.
is something
Covenant
very
between
different.
two families, not two
Yes,
individuals. Yeah.
not two
Yep.
individual. Um,
Yep.
and so like it's the same word. We're using the same word, but it has two different meanings with some similarity.
Mhm.
So yeah, in this day of time, somebody choosing to just get rid of their wife it's not, it is a, Jesus does it in a way that it's calling them out as doing something to her, which is also really,
Yes.
because it
Yeah.
should have been it should have been a like disservice or a dishonor towards her father. Um
Right. Broke the
Mhm.
contract with the father.
Yeah. And Jesus does this in Matthew 5 when he's talking about divorce, and it what am I, the wording of it is really interesting, because I'm losing my train of thought on it. He
It's
in
when he's talking about um like the whole like possessiveness or lust.
yeah. Uh, well, he talks about marriage, and he talks about um divorcing a woman. It doesn't make her it makes her a victim of adultery. And
Right.
so Jesus
Right.
has this tendency to take divorce and turn it on, no, you're actually doing something to the woman in the situation, which is, this is radical feminism in the first century. Like
Yeah.
it really
Absolutely.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
um like some of this stuff makes men uncomfortable today, and Jesus was saying it 2000 years ago. Like it's,
Hmm.
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm.
So
And then
yeah,
there's the disciple saying like, wow, if that's going to be how he treats his wife, really shouldn't have gotten married in the first place. Like,
absolutely. Yeah.
and then so that is the transitions to this. There's usually in most printings of the Bible, there is a subheading. Jesus
Hmm.
talks about eunuchs here, but it begins with he responded. So it's a continuation of that
Right.
conversation, getting into the
Yeah.
eunuchs. What do you all feel here?
This one, this one is so good. And Brandon, you can talk. I know I'm doing a lot of talking here. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, we're excited to have your insight here. Like, yeah.
Okay. So this one, I just want to say that it is in fact, I've just recently done some writing on this, where yes, it is anachronistic to put queer identities on historical people. However, it is also anachronistic to put cis heteronormativity onto historical people. So
Mhm.
when we get here and Jesus is like, there are people who are eunuchs from the mother's belly. There are people who are made eunuchs by other people, and people who make
Yeah.
themselves eunuchs for the heavenly reign, right? The we have this understanding that eunuchs are celibate, in that what Jesus is saying is that people will become celibate or will be made celibate. I like, honestly, people will see like from the mother's belly and by other people as like actual castration, or like born intersex or something like that, where
Mhm.
it is a natural kind of form of celibacy, but then people will choose celibacy, and that's intentional. Because within the first couple hundred years there were people who were castrating themselves for the heavenly reign.
Mhm.
Origin, right? Yeah.
Like Origin, yeah. He castrated himself.
I
And
don't think I knew that about Origin.
it is disputed whether or not he actually
That's
did,
fair.
but yeah. uh, but people did actually do it, like not just Origin.
Yeah.
And the Roman authorities that were kind of in charge of Christianity were like, we can't just have people castrating themselves. We have to like have children for, to work and to find
Gotta keep that
armies and stuff like
economy
that.
running.
Yeah, we got to keep. We're gonna see some patterns developing here. Um, uh, but and so like there was an intentional reinterpretation of becoming eunuchs for the kingdom of God, is what is normally used, heavenly reign here, which is I think a good translation, because I've been trying to think through a better understanding of kingdom of God, and I honestly hate the kinship or the kingdom
Kingdom.
of. I don't
It's
I
cute,
hate that term.
but
It,
not a good
it's a little
translation.
cringe.
Yeah.
It's kind of cringe.
Yeah,
I don't like
yeah.
it either.
Um, so yeah, it got reinterpreted for political economic reasons as celibacy, and that's basically how we've understood it for the last, like, I think 1700 years. Um, that is fundamentally not true, because in the first century, eunuchs were not understood to be celibate. This idea that because they have um because men have been castrated, that they don't engage in sexual activity, is a very narrow understanding of sexuality. Like this is like saying
Mhm.
lesbians don't have sex because
Right.
neither of them have a penis, right? um
Right.
Eunuchs were known in the first century, in around the first century, as being very sexually active. They were seen as sexually active with men because um they could be, they were seen as less than men within a patriarchal understanding, and so it was culturally acceptable to have for eunuchs to have sex with men, um but also they would have sex with women because they could, and like the women wouldn't get pregnant. Like there is
Mhm.
even in like
Yeah.
who's Juvenal, I think, wrote about somebody who had a bunch of eunuchs following her around, and basically said she has them following her around because they're the ones that are able to satisfy her. Basically basically saying like normal men don't know how to please a woman, which is hilarious. Like,
It's amazing.
yeah, like
I mean,
we have
I get it.
record.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is basically a 2,000-year-old record of somebody being like, yeah, cis men can't find the clit. Like, this is the same thing.
Yep.
It's not changed. Eunuchs were sexually active. They engaged it, like if you believe in a gender binary, they engaged in same sex, and they engaged in heterosexual. But if you don't adhere to a gender binary and you look at it in the first century, eunuchs were not men or women. They were neither. They were seen as people who had lost their masculinity, which was a threat to men at the time, because losing your
Mm-hmm.
masculinity was seen as something that is a threat to an individual, and so castration is kind
Yeah.
of like the worst thing that
You
can
get
happen
knocked
to a
down the
man.
hierarchy.
Yeah, you get knocked down the hierarchy. Like I said, we're going to see some patterns here.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like in Roman times, men would do things that were specifically seen as masculine, and perform masculinity. But
Mm-hmm.
eunuchs didn't have to adhere to that. And they were
Mhm.
seen as less than because they were less masculine, and they would they would make fun of younger boys for performing anything feminine, and called them eunuchs because eunuchs were like feminine men, like the masculine, like putting people down that we still have today
Yeah.
Yeah,
existed
like
2,000 years ago.
calling people a pussy, or right? Like
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
like it's all been there.
Mm-hmm.
So like, but within the first century, eunuchs were neither male nor female. They did not fit in the binary, which means that in the first century, even Rome understood a non-binary understanding of gender. Now they had very strict gender
Yeah.
roles,
Mm-hmm.
which is problematic. But like to say that the Bible only understands two genders is wrong, because it was written in the first century using terms that implied a third or a non-gender. So no, the Bible doesn't
Mhm.
understand gender binaries. It actively uses words that require an understanding that of the lack of gender binaries. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah.
people choosing to people choosing to become eunuchs does a couple things. One, it's men choosing to step down from their hierarchy, which ultimately is like this theme that he's doing here, like the patriarchal hierarchy that we have within this marriage system that harms women. Um, some people are going to get completely out of that system, and that's a good thing. But also, like he he uses you're going to become essentially what we would say a queer person. Um,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
it so like yeah, it's anachronistic to say that eunuchs were trans people, because it's not always a choice, right? It's
Yeah.
anachronistic to say that they were homosexual or something like that, because those are our understandings of relationship dynamics. However, it is entirely anachronistic to say cis heteronormativity was what they were talking about, because it's
Mm-hmm.
incredibly clear they're not.
There's some overlap, but it's also just a distinct time, a distinct cultural understanding. The different
Yeah,
categories.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the
Yeah.
Bible includes bats as birds, right? It's just a different
Yeah,
way of organizing how we understand things. It's
yeah,
not
Yeah.
yeah.
the one's right, one's wrong. It's just different.
The map is not the
It,
territory. Yeah. Okay. So I'm curious. So the way I've been reading this passage for about the past couple of years is trying to figure out why Jesus is saying this after the conversation about look, you can't be patriarchal in your marriage, is basically what he's saying. And the disciples are like, yeah, if you're gonna treat women like objects like that, you shouldn't get married. And then he says, like, kind of this glancing blow of saying, like, there are certain categories of people who don't fit within, um, who aren't permitted within our paradigm for our paradigm of marriage. Like,
Mhm.
and we call them all eunuchs, but there's three different types. And he's kind of saying, like, there's a fourth type, which is patriarchal dudes. Like, yeah, if you're
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
look at your woman as your woman and cast them aside as material, yeah, you shouldn't you don't pass through the gate of marriage, just like these categories of people. Which seems there's kind of a wittiness to, like, if you're gonna be a dick, you don't get to use one. But I'm also like I'm hearing now almost like a different way of reading it would be, look, if you are going to go down this path that I'm calling you to in marriage of fully co-equal union that reflects the image of God, then you are going to be stepping outside of, you're no longer a real man, according
Mhm.
to the dudes who really feel like they need to be describing and defining
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
And you're going to be seen as a eunuch in some ways. Like, what kind of man are you if you treat your female partner as
As an
your
equal.
partner,
Yeah.
as an equal? So I don't know which way I want to take this story now, but I like both.
I do think that Jesus is moving past marriage once he gets here
Yeah.
because eunuchs didn't get married in I don't know if Rome, if this was true in Rome. I know it was true in um during like the old Babylonian time or in old and middle Babylonian time, which is really my expertise.
Hmm.
That like only free people got married. And so like eunuchs, at least in more ancient times, would not have been married at all. But that doesn't necessarily mean that people don't have relationships. So I think that bringing up eunuchs, I think he's kind of moving past marriage, but he's still very much saying, um, like to follow the kingdom of God, there are people who are going to be called to stop like stop being dicks, like, and you're going to
Yeah.
be seen as feminine, and that is what is needed for the heavenly reign. And you know, we have a current like push right now to remove the like feminine powers within the church and the people calling empathy sin. Like Jesus is
Yeah.
literally calling these people out, being like, uh you want to be part of this kingdom, you gotta cut off your dick and you gotta get out of the patriarchal cycle. Like he's
Cut off
being
your
serious there.
dickishness. Yeah.
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 um I
I mean, it
don't
strikes me that
personally
this
think.
is not that far from chapter 18, where it's talking about cutting off the eye and the hand if they make you sin.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
it seems
That's
like it may
good.
be a continuation here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that Jesus is telling people to actually cut off body parts. um and also at the same time, like I don't think that this is like banning gender confirmation surgeries. Just putting that out there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um that's not the point. Like I said, like exegesis requires finding interpretation within the context, like that is out of context. But
Hmm.
he's very much saying like this entire patriarchal system that you're taking place in, that you're having these marriages in, where you're seeing women as less than, like, to follow me, you've got to break out of that. Like you've got to metaphorically cut off your own dick so you can break free of these hierarchies. It's incredibly subversive because like I said before, that you know, that umbrella weird umbrella thing that people like Jesus is
Yeah.
saying that doesn't work
Suddenly
here
started showing
anymore.
up everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna keep moving here. This is great because
This is fantastic. Yeah.
yeah. So this theme of stepping out of hierarchy continues on.
I'll just finish this chapter and we'll see what we find there. Yeah. Then young children were brought for him to place his hands on them and pray. But the students scolded them. So Jesus told them, "Release the children, and don't stop them from coming to me. The heavenly reign is for people like them." And he placed his hands on them, and then continued on from there. Notably, someone came up to him and asked, "Teacher, what good should I do to hold on to age-long life?" "Why are you asking me about good?" Jesus responded. "Only one is good. But if you want to participate in life, observe the commandments." "Which ones?" he asked. Jesus told him, "Do not murder, do not have an affair, do not steal, do not falsely accuse people, value your father and mother, and love your neighbor as yourself." The young man said to him, I have strictly observed all of these. Where do I still fall behind? If you want to be complete, Jesus declared, go, sell your property, and give to people in poverty. Then you'll have what's valuable in the heavens. Then come back and follow me. But when he heard that idea, the young man went away sadly, because he had a lot of property. Then Jesus said to his students, honestly, I'm telling you, participating in the heavenly reign will be difficult for someone who is rich. Again, I'm telling you, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to participate in God's reign. The students were shocked when they heard that and asked, then who can be restored? Jesus peered at them, then said, for humans, this is impossible, but everything is possible for God. Then, in response, Peter said, look, we let go of everything and followed you. So what's it going to be like for us? Then Jesus told them, honestly, I'm telling you, when the Son of Humanity sits on his praiseworthy throne, you who have followed me into the restoration will also sit on 12 thrones, governing the 12 tribes of Israel. Anyone who has let go of houses, or brothers, or sisters, or father, or mother, or children, or farmlands in representing me will receive 100 times more than they give up, and will inherit age-long life. So, many who are first will be last, and the last will be first. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
It's a lot packed in there.
There's a lot of movements. I want to highlight, like, again, Jesus is still subverting hierarchical understandings. Because, like I said, Pax Romana, husband at the top, then the wife, then the children. So Jesus has dealt with with misogyny in the hierarchy within patriarchy, and then there's this little thing about children, and Jesus is like,
yeah,
stop targeting children, like, which again, like, this type of thing, these are patterns that we're seeing within our the current oppressive empire that we have right now. There's a reason why politicians are going after, like, trans healthcare for children. And it's not just to protect children, it's because they're actually taking away children's rights. Like, they're institutionalizing the government being able to define gender for children, institutionalizing that the government, not doctors, not researchers, get a say in children's medical care. That they do not have a choice in what type of education that they should get, because, parents' rights, right? Like, parents' rights are fundamentally in opposition of children's rights, because it says that parents have the right to dictate how children are treated, and in a fundamental way. Like, that makes sense, because parents, you have a responsibility to take care of your kids, and so if you do it responsibly, then things should go, like, well. But the problem is like, we have incredibly abusive parents who are abusive simply because of their ideologies. There is a reason why the number one cause for youth homelessness is simply being LGBTQ plus. That's because of parents, like, having ideologies that are abusive. And so, like, the the parents' rights argument doesn't sit well with me, because it is fundamentally about grooming children to be a certain way, and if they don't fit in that, then there's a problem. So we still have this. We still have the marginalization of children within the 21st century. And I get that Jesus isn't making all these points necessarily, but he just got done, like, uprooting patriarchy, and then talks about children and allows children to be treated as equals. And that's something we don't have today. We are using scapegoats to take away children's rights and equality for children. Yeah. something that that Rome did at the time too. Like children were in fact below slaves, if I'm remembering right, in the household structure. Like so Jesus, like having them come and being treated as equals as people following Jesus is incredibly symbolic about the fact that Jesus actually sees children as humans.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those who have the lowest possible status have
Mm-hmm.
just as much of a right to come to Jesus as anybody else and receive
Absolutely.
affirmation and value. And
Yeah.
I mean, even the next
Yeah.
chapter, the common refrain is that the last shall be first.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it
then
just goes right into the rich young
Yeah.
ruler, which we
is
love.
hard not to just. Yeah, of course Jesus is subverting the idea that riches and wealth is the goal here, right?
Yeah. And the, like, I've said this before, like the enemy of the New Testament isn't Satan, it's the rich. Because
Yeah.
it comes up so much. Like even like even the root of all evil, like money, or
Yeah.
money is the root of all evil. And then we add the word kinds in English because we can't have money in a capitalistic society be called the root of all evil. And then like James is blames the rich for every negative thing that happens in our world. But yeah, Jesus is not a fan of the rich, especially when poverty still exists. Yeah, so next time people are like, see, Elon Musk said a positive thing about Christianity, like Elon Musk is literally what Christianity stood against.
Everything. Yep.
Absolutely everything.
Absolutely everything. Yeah,
yeah,
and like within this context of it being of the rich young ruler saying, "Look, I did what the religious authorities said constitutes like being a good part of the community." It's a broader indictment of kind of like an ecosystem, a religious ecosystem that is able to tell the rich, "Hey, if you keep like." You don't cheat on your partner and you don't like, these are all important things. Like those are good commandments that he did. Like there, it's not some side. This is not one of those occasions of a slur or a slam against like really arcane, meticulous rules and laws.
Yeah.
But
it's not like giving a
like,
tithe of your time and dill and mint or whatever.
Yeah. And failing to uphold, justice and mercy, which comes elsewhere in this gospel. But if the ecosystem focuses on these things, but isn't able to say, there's this like memory we have in our sacred tradition of Jubilee, of returning all things back to everyone, at least about every generation. There's something really fractured there. And if he wants to exceed the righteousness or the faithfulness of the Pharisees, he's gonna have to do actually more of Leviticus, do more Torah in this case and recognize. I mean, so much of Jesus's logic here is like the parts of the Torah that I'm really going to emphasize here have to do with you're no longer going to be like Egypt. There is this drumbeat in Torah of we remember what it was like to be making bricks and playing the hierarchy game. But we're not going to be like that. We remember what it was like to be an alien in a foreign land, but we're not going to treat aliens in our land like that.
Right.
And to find this here of like, and this is the anti-hoarding energy in the Torah is something that Jesus is centering on here and saying like, man, you're going to have to like hit the reset button on the economics of your household. if you're going to actually want to
Yeah.
know the fullness of the reign of God. Like God can't fully the way God is going to fully participate in this world through you, the way you get to be a partner with God in the renewal of all things, it's going to have to be starting with sharing. And that's actually liberating of him to no longer be hiding on his pile of gold.
Yeah. This reminds me of that reel, or it was probably on TikTok also, but I saw it on Instagram Reels of Dave Ramsey, which is everyone's favorite financial advisor. Somebody asked him, if I remember right, is he being greedy by owning property and renting it, like housing property, and getting rich off that? And his response was, well, it's not my property. It's God's property. I'm just managing it, right? It reminds me of that because, like, that is
holy shit.
You better give all the proceeds to God then, right?
Well, he's, he is a steward of the money that God is allowing him to use. But like, it just reminds me of the way, like, if you're looking for like the specific rules, like people who love money, which Dave Ramsey loves money, his entire career is about money, even though he plays this very like, I'm a good Christian person with money. No, he loves money. Like finds a way to get around the rules to justify the hoarding of wealth while poverty still exists. And like Jesus is like, yeah, okay, you got the basics here, but you're still hoarding in a world with poverty. You got to kind of see the issue with this, right? Like there is no way forward within this system if you're continuing to gain wealth while people are still impoverished. But we again, patterns, right? Like Elon Musk said, if somebody could prove that it only took like 15 billion at the time to end hunger in the world, he would donate it. And then somebody proved it, and it never did. There is like the truth of the matter is hoarding wealth fundamentally requires the exploitation of other people and of the earth. And you can't have the rich without the poor. And if you understand that, then you understand that it is fundamentally unethical to be rich. There's no way around that. And so like Jesus is like, you can't follow the Torah and be rich because that you're not even treating your fellow human being like a human being. You're treating them as a means to gain more wealth. And again, it's a hierarchy thing, right? Where this entire section is about hierarchies. The rich are honored far above the poor. And Jesus is like, your wealth and your power and your position is nothing. Like it amounts to nothing here. And he's just continuously flipping that hierarchy.
Yeah. Comes to mind is the way that people use, well, but if you live in America, even if you're homeless on the street, like you're more wealthy than 98% of the world's population, or whatever nonsense people spout about that is really just completely a distraction from the reality of people's experience.
Yeah, it is. And that's so incredibly unnuanced as well, because like like in the United States, we're so individualistic at the same time. Like sure, like a person in a community that all works together might make less money but do like physically better because they're in a communal setting, right? In the United States, we don't necessarily have that. That's not to say that like poverty in the United States is actually worse than anywhere else. What I am saying is like it is fundamentally like wrong to try to compare poverty and saying it's not that bad. No, like it is poverty, regardless of the situation. In honestly, in the United States, we criminalize poverty, and we are continuing to criminalize poverty. Like that's not a good thing. That makes you the bad guys. Like,
Right.
we're the baddies over here.
Yeah.
Yeah. To try to justify that poverty here is okay because it is worse someplace else. That's that's evil. Like that.
Yeah, it's gaslighting and victim blaming and just generally all kinds of fucked up.
Yeah.
So we've got about 10 minutes left. I'm hoping we can talk about in chapter 20, verses 17 through 28. Brandon, could you read those? That's in some ways the culmination of a lot of these themes of stepping outside of hierarchy and occasionally actively breaking it apart.
While going up to Jerusalem, Jesus took the 12 aside, gathering them close on the road. He said to them, "Look, we're going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Humanity is going to be handed over to the lead priests and Bible scholars, and they will sentence him to death. Then they will hand him over to the foreign authorities to be mocked, severely whipped, and crucified, and on the third day he will be raised up." Then the mother of the sons of Zebedee came to him with her sons, bowed down to him, and made a request of him. "What is it you want?" he asked her. "Say that these 2 sons of mine may sit with one on your right and one on your left as you reign," she said. "You don't understand what you're asking," Jesus responded. "Can you drink the cup I'm about to drink?" "We can," they answered. "You certainly will drink of my cup," he told them. "But sitting on my right or my left is not mine to give. Rather, it's for those for whom it's been prepared by my Father." When the other 10 heard all this, they were angry with the 2 brothers. So Jesus called them over and said, "You see how the leaders of other peoples lord over them, and the powerful people impose control over them. It will not be that way with you. Instead, whichever of you wants to become important among you will be a servant among you, and whichever of you wants to be first will take on the role of a worker and slave to the rest of you. Just as the Son of Humanity did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a price of freeing many enslaved people." The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Yeah, that really is quite the crescendo there of much of what we've been talking about with in verse 25 and 26. Like, you've seen how domination works among the Gentiles, among other communities.
Yeah.
It's not how we're going to roll.
Yeah.
It's so straightforward. Like, there's no sideways glances or like subtle sidestepping of like with Torah. He's just like, nope, they can be dicks. We're not gonna be dicks.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
And like fundamentally here, and this is why I'm writing a commentary on Matthew that I'm entitling "How to Overthrow an Empire." This is how Jesus envisions overthrowing the Roman Empire, is creating a new entire structure. But going back to like that, have my son sit on the right and left of you whenever you come into glory. Matthew sees Jesus' death on the cross as Jesus coming into his glory. Because ultimately the worst that an empire can do to you is kill you, and Jesus comes back to life. And so the crucifixion is kind of Jesus coming into his glory. That is the fulfillment of Daniel. But the Jesus saying, "Can you drink the cup I'm about to drink?" He's talking about his crucifixion, right? And he does say that the two brothers will drink kind of the same cup, but he's actually making reference to the fact that there will be other people beside him when he comes into his glory, and God, like, he's not choosing that. It's because he is going to be crucified with other insurrectionists. And so like this is the ultimate like flip here of coming into the glory is dying, and the people beside him who have those places of honor are in fact other insurrectionists. which is even more interesting because like they aren't necessarily pro-Jesus insurrectionists, but they are very anti-Rome. And I say that because crucifixion wasn't just like we get the word translated as thieves. They weren't thieves. They didn't crucify thieves. Crucifixion was intentionally, these are threats to the empire. We are making an example out of them. It's exactly what
they're political criminals.
They're political criminals. We're seeing this with Trump right now of disappearing political people. So it is the ultimate flip and kind of the ultimate FU to the Roman Empire to be like, you are being overthrown by a person that the only thing you can do is kill. Yeah. So yeah, the entire structure of this two chapters is about disrupting hierarchies and doing things different because the Roman Empire needed those hierarchies to maintain their power. Jesus is subverting those. And we see that today. Like those those same hierarchies that they had are still the ones that are being utilized today to maintain power in the rise of Christian fascism, because that type of oppressive power needs that type of hierarchy. And it's not consistent with being part of the heavenly reign.
Right. Yeah, it's a whole strategy of I'm going to be okay. I'm going to get what I need by dominating and taking power away from others.
Yeah.
Rather than this whole like real power is serving, because if everyone's doing that, then everyone gets what they need. It comes back to that Jubilee idea, right? Like, there is a way to have things structured that it's not just a few people at the top of the pyramid who get what they need.
Yeah.
But it requires a lot to get there.
And that takes spiritual discipline, inner work. Like the churchy word discipleship is the work of like constantly not letting that anxious ego and imperial energy in us have the last word. Constantly renouncing the old man, as it were, to like I know I need communal support, courage, and imagination through ritual, through shared joy and meaning making. I need religion to help me get out of the patriarchal game, get capitalism out of my soul, get patriarchy out of my soul. I feel so let down by so many years in church where they had sometimes good things to learn about how to be a soulful person and access that, like, depth dimension of being human. But man, they're like the center of the Jesus way is so much more. That like this sense of like renouncing power games was not, it's so explicit in Matthew's gospel. I think in across the Christian scriptures, it feels so absent from so much liturgy, from so much communal and personal spiritual formation. I would love to find more, I guess, communal pedagogies and like a didache for today of how to be leaning into the divine through renouncing power. Because I learn a lot outside the church about how to renounce power, but I feel impoverished by the bulk of the church and how to do that.
Yeah. And part of that is, I think that and I know that we need to wrap up, so I'll try to keep it quick.
Bring us to church.
But we have a fundamental broken understanding of God in general. we have an idea of a hierarchical God, that God is up there, that we constantly say that we are unworthy, and all of this stuff, which is actually not necessarily Christian. Like, you can read it in there, into the text, but it came out very much later, or not very much later, pretty quick actually. Whenever like Christianity became Romanized, and hierarchy needed to be a thing, and God became more of a hierarchical understanding. However, the fundamental thing about Christianity is like the idea of the incarnation, and that it's not that humanity is unworthy of God. Like, humanity and people are worthy of God. That is why God came. And there, and it's, to me, the idea that it's that God comes because of humanity, for humanity, and for the earth, it fundamentally means that God is wanting to do things together, and not be like, I'm up here and telling you what to do. This is a together thing. I think that we get that a lot more in things like process theology, and like Tom Ord's open and relational theology, that are really trying to get at this idea that God actually isn't seeking power, that God isn't necessarily narcissistic to create humans to worship this God, which is an incredibly narcissistic thing to do, if you think about it. So like,
weirdly insecure.
Yes.
So there are people trying to do that type of work, but you're dealing with 1900 years of Christian theology that required a hierarchy, so essentially Rome wouldn't just genocide all the Christians. But that's a incredibly different story of like the influence of Rome because of Rome's threat of violence, and ultimately the Roman takeover of Christianity. But we do not have time for that.
But it's incredibly relevant. So
And how that's the story we live in. Thank you so much for being here. We're gonna wrap up there. Thank you, everybody listening and watching, for your company on this leg of the journey. Again, thank you, Kalie May Hargrove, for your wisdom and insight. The easiest way to support Found in Translation is to leave us a rating or review on your whatever podcast player, app, or website you are enjoying this on, especially if that's Apple Podcasts or YouTube. That helps the robots help other people find more of these kinds of conversations. You can find us on Facebook as Found in Translation. You can read The Liberation and Inclusion Translation at www.litbible.net, and follow its developments on Threads as @lit.bible. You can follow Brian Johnson on Blue Sky as @litbible.net. You can follow me on Threads as @BDRhodes. Kalie May, what's the best way for people to find and follow what you're up to?
Most of the stuff that I'm doing is through the Center for Prophetic Imagination, so you can find that on most social media. Just search up Prophetic Imagination, except for Blue Skies, because that's too many characters in the title, so that's prophetic image. I'm also on Blue Sky as Kalie May at the bsky.social, whatever. But we're doing a lot of our stuff through Substack. We have so much that's coming out there, and I feel like we put out a lot of stuff, and it's about to like increase. So we're gonna have more long form videos. We're gonna have more writing, and if you become a paid subscriber on our Substack, you get to hear more of my ideas on Matthew, because I am writing a commentary on Matthew using the Lit Bible, which is kind of a partnership, as in I asked permission to use the translation for free, and you guys said yes. But that is a read it as I write it type format. I have posted the first one, so it's just getting started. And it's really going to continue looking at a lot of these themes. Like I said, the name of this commentary is How to Overthrow an Empire. I really think that this is what the book of Matthew is about countering the Roman Empire. If you didn't get that from our talk today. So if you want to know more of my thoughts, I'm so excited to get to the Beatitudes and stuff, and it's gonna so much
Sick.
to get there. But yeah, you can subscribe, pay, and you can read that as I write it. But yeah, so much content is coming. So
awesome. Looking forward to more of that. Everybody, the music that you're listening to is by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. Found in Translation was produced on unceded Chinook and Kalapuya land. Goodbye, Brandon.
Bye, Brandon.
Bye, Kalie May. Bye, everybody.
bye.